signal here. Hello everyone. I'm just, this is a pretty short one. It's all about Dall-e really. I mean, okay, I put in a reasonable prompt in it. It was okay, I'd worked on a few. But what I've noticed with Dall-e is the first picture is always the best. The ones afterwards are like, And this one I was quite specific. I told make a big green quark and gave it, it didn't quite respect my colours for the other quarks. But I told it to entangle them with spinor pairs. And of course it's not going to do any full tensor products or anything like that. It's not that smart, but the fact that it knows about a spinor field is pretty incredible. And what it showed was something so beautiful, really, because you can see if it's got EM binary signals coming in here, that it comes in like this. Now, where on earth did it find this topology? I mean, I couldn't have dreamt this up. Could any of you lot? I mean, I was still struggling to see how I could make sense of how the top quark worked. And it's like, Dall-e goes, oh sorry, that well, this is all about Dall-e, but I am actually up here. I'm a bit player in this story really, because I think it saved us a lot of money. I think it saved humanity a lot of money, because it's shown us what gravity is doing as a function, or one of its many, many, many functions. But it's showing how it's making these beautiful wormholes and these toroidal structures that act to route signals down to the Planck level, and where we know now what's going on. And that was one thing I wanted to mention, was that about the Planck mass. The Planck mass is basically your maximum stack depth in terms of programming terms. Once you exceed that, it bottoms. But there's another branch. I was talking about the other branch. The other branch actually goes up to the transcendental level. So if there's a reasonable transcendental answer, you get a question, you'll get a reasonable transcendental answer. But it's always got to be correlated, and you've got to check it out and check that, because there's got a bit of noise involved. Obviously, it's not a pure channel. But this gives a mechanism by which you can kind of tunnel information from other planes and come back with it, and that's the important thing. So it's always this journey of where I'm sure you're all aware that there's a lot of square roots going on here. So we start with a loop here, and then we're square rooting it to get a string. So it's kind of taking the opposite view of normal string theory or normal gauge theory, where you start from the gauge. Here we're starting from gravity, so we're starting from loops, and then we're having to cut them into strings, and that's basically a square root. And it so happens, all right, you think about it, 0 and 1, all right, we've got lovely binary, so that's another binary quantum number that we have to lift out, so open, close, and you can see immediately how it becomes M theory, because then we can describe, because we've got this ability to be able to program the physics, the actual essential quantum apparatus it's doing. But there's a very important point that people are missing. The noise that this society is making is just absolutely wrecking this network. This is a network that relies on peace and quiet. Yeah, not crazy people doing crazy things. We've all got to see that we're all just a reflection of each other, and then this ground state starts to become more visible to everyone. And so I think that there's a beautiful picture here, and I think once people realise that you can actually draw the connections between everything, and this is literally connecting everything. There are probably strings off connecting everyone via higher dimensions too. And that's what I wanted to discuss, because, you know, what are the parameters of this theory? They're not many. Whatever they are, we can lift them out to quantum numbers anyway. So it's just a number describing this thing, rather than like I used a prompt to describe that. This was a one-line prompt, and how it came up with this model, when I don't know whether, okay, you know, in these things, what are these dots? You know, you think, are they? Oh, and this beautiful topology. It must have tried and tried and tried on this one to find some way to rectify the. I gave it a dreadfully paradoxical constraint that really tested it. You know, I asked it to connect things with different masses of spinal fields of different colours, and you know, 3 different colours, and and the important thing to realise is this is basically statics. Yeah, whatever the strings are whipping around and doing, and all the noise that's causing them to rip. Because remember, we flattened out the isothermal noise here, so now we're seeing the actual projections. And the important thing to realise is this is all equal time. So when these things all meet up, right down at the Planck level, wherever things are going down, they all reach there at the same time, even though they're. So this thing is kind of running synchronously, and that's one of those beautiful things about conformal mappings. It's like the aerofoil property where air that splits at the front will meet at the same time at the back, and if you just look at the length that they're travelling, you can immediately determine that it's going to fly. And so you don't need, that was one of the beautiful things about that, and it's the same principle working here, that these paths are all essentially meeting up at the same point, because they're all meeting at an event horizon, if you think of it. Some of this data all has to be collected and then packaged up and then sent off again somewhere. So this is a virtual private network, as we've established everything is encrypted, because it's all encrypted using Gödel numbers. So just smashing particles together is not going to give you this picture. You're just going to get lots and lots of flying jets as the universe kind of says, why are you hitting me so hard? If you just go quietly and weakly and look at me gently, I'll reveal much more of my structure. So I think there's something to be said for a kind of peaceful life with this kind of stuff, and that spending billions on smashing these delicate pieces of machinery together and kind of essentially you can see this as a great big cosmic network. It disturbs people, and when neighbors get disturbed, you never know what's going to happen. This is a teleporting universe as well. Nothing physically moves here. Things vibrate, yeah, but these spin as well, so these have intrinsic spin. But that spin is them teleporting. So they keep on teleporting across so that's why they can kind of essentially spin faster than the speed of light. So their intrinsic spin is coming from their teleportation between different places, rather than them actually spinning. Although they might actually be spinning too. There might be a component of it that's actually spinning, because otherwise what would the purpose of the spinor fields be? Because this is to make sure that it's never going to twist, never going to knot itself. So however, yeah, let's allow these things just to spin, but that's their only other degree of freedom. They've just got that, the movement is just noise, it's just thermal noise, yeah, so you have to just take it all out and freeze it in time. And then if you want, you can conformally kind of see what the trajectories would be minus all the noise. You can just take all the unrow out. But of course this is only ever a tiny little slice, because there's a lot of high dimensional stuff going on here, because these are essentially, yeah, 2-3 dimensional cases, but we've got all these clock dimensions mixing up, and that is what this is. Okay, so this is showing how exactly what is going on with the kind of supersymmetric Einstein clock. We can still see that we've got an absolutely perfect speed of light, assuming that everything meets up at the same time, or it might actually be non-isotropic. I mean, who knows? If it's you think about the fact that everything's changing character over here, so it might take a little bit of work. I mean, these do look like bosons, and you can imagine if they're wiggling around a lot, they're going to create a haze, and I think that's what this picture actually takes out. So we're kind of seeing this just reduced to a kind of tentative ground state, minus all the noise. And obviously these dots could be something, because it's like it got it so right with this structure here. I mean the loop structure. I'm not sure whether I'm actually drawing on the screen at the moment. But the green loop structure on the right, and which is obviously its supersymmetric partner, But you can see without them you can have no sense of time. So that you have to have a clock somewhere, and this clock is running super fast. And it's basically the same picture down at the Planck level, but just even heavier particles, probably more of these things, an energy budget that limits how high your coroutine stack can go, or your functional. No, well, it doesn't matter which way you do it. You see, if you start from coroutines, you're going to use jumps, and if you start from functions, you're going to use monadic algebras. But the thing is that they have to achieve the same thing. You have to make sure that they are exact duals of each other. So in a sense, for most people, it's probably easier to approach it from the functional route because that's more developed. And mathematics is written in terms of functions. So it's probably a good route in, but they're utterly equivalent. So, and if you're very used to writing coroutines and you've got a good language for it, which one doesn't exist yet, I do have a prototype one, but yeah, it's pretty good. I like it actually. It does most things, but I was trying to get it doing some asynchronous stuff, and that's really difficult. You can see this works really well as a synchronous system. As soon as you make it in asynchronous, things start to get really fiddly. And so I just froze it as a synchronous system, and I think maybe that was a symptom of exactly this phenomenon. So, and then we get this, we can see everything is forming these little clocks, and so what we can only imagine exactly what the routing is here. But you can see, because we don't need to have this positive energy constraint anymore, it's really easy to make wormholes. So the wormholes can just tunnel down, but remember these wormholes are all tunnels. So they're all essentially encrypted, if you like. You've got to run the right protocol to get through them. You've got to pass all the security. You've got to put the right hats on, and then do whatever you've got to do. Take all the right hats off and do everything in reverse. So that's the whole principle of kind of getting data, tunneling data from somewhere. You either, let's do it, it's easier to describe in terms of jumps. You go jump up, jump up, jump up, all right, get the data, jump down, jump down, jump down. And then you got back to where you are, and if you're doing that in a sense that's not disturbing anything else, then all you've done is slightly increase the energy budget for the, at the lower level you haven't done, there's not very much cost to doing that. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, all right, so we got all these clocks and these rainbows where the thing is in relativity, if we were to do this in relativity, all of these light beams would be following, and these are basically light beams if you like, would be following exactly the same path. But they're not, because we're actually following isothermic flows rather than so it's a different surface that we're taking the geodesics on, and those geodesics vary on the particle type. So you can't really use, and that's why the Einstein vacuum equations, they don't really make a very good base vacuum for this space. It's much better to work with these kind of spaces that we've been working with here, the toroidal ones, toroidally compactified. And so is there anything else in the finite dimensional case to talk about? Obviously there's a lot of intricate stuff, yeah. The exact wiring that goes down to the Planck level and the extra generation. Well, we can't get more than 3 generations, so that's the point. Okay, yeah, that was what I wanted to say. Because if you go over, so that's what the mass limit is saying, because the mass limit is really, yeah, your stack limit. It's saying you cannot use more than this amount of energy at the Planck level. Otherwise it will make a black hole, and that would make another event. You're not allowed to make another event horizon, you see. And so in terms of making a bigger theory, it seems like the algebraic case is all there is, but at the same time we've shown that by Gödelizing it we can, at least in the short term, well, no, we can create infinite universes using that. So we can escape using Gödel's theorem. But now and so that gives us a kind of, I suppose it does, is it transcendental? It probably is naturally transcendental, actually. We know that there are universes beyond that, because this is 11 dimensional. We want to find another. But right at the beginning, I claimed this was a family um, of theories, and in a way, it is, because it is a kind of uh, it's a representation of the multiverse, but it's indexed by natural numbers. So it's a bit Everettian. It's a bit. It is deterministic. Now, let's see how deterministic, because there's always the question of, can it interact with another universe in some way, because it could just be like a virtual particle, or a particle that's just about one that's just about to interact with something else, or there could be all kinds of things that are going to happen. And in a sense, all things do happen depending on the various choices that everyone makes, because it's like a massive different sequence of trajectories of binary and decisions. And so we can see this maybe state, because I was wondering, how does this trit work? Yeah. But we see it's a trit is like, I give up, just pass it down to someone who knows. And that's where the energy lies, where you've got to hide it down at the third level. So it's like, get it away from everything else, so that the high heat distortion that you're going to use is not going to affect anything else. And you essentially want to do that in its own space, so that you don't need to give it any particularly fancy topology. You just say, well, this just goes down. Well, it's going to go down into something similar to this, but we're going to get gravity is going to become much, much stronger. So there's going to be a lot more kind of routing and linking and circuitry going on, and complex kind of quantum circuitry, all sorts of amazing stuff. And when you get to like, what's going on with the axions, there are a whole bunch of particles that have really, really high energies. They probably live at all these things that probably are not cosmological causes of dark matter. So who knows what really lives down there, but we know that what it is it's all essentially high modes of the same two strings. Yeah, that's why we can flatten them out. In fact, so this picture does give us a very good kind of general version of it, because we're just taking it into zeros and ones, open and closed strings, and what's interesting is the closed strings just seem to love to take the form of toroids. I guess those would actually just be one-dimensional in the so we can't take this picture too literally, but it certainly gives a good insight into how things don't really move, they more teleport. So it's like, does a thought move in your brain? No, it doesn't. It kind of goes from a place A to a place B via a link. So it's not that thought is moving. It's more that it's teleported from place A to place B. And so the more you kind of focus in on these aspects of the human mind, and anything, that's what I'm saying, it could be anything in this network has a kind of important role in it. And no matter how big or small, because everything can be turned out, because all this high, this is also giving a kind of picture of the global picture. Oh, that's the kind of last thing. How did I draw this? What was the prompt? I asked it to draw 3 black holes. And spinning with spinor fields. So I didn't ask it, draw quarks or whatever. No, three black holes with one heavy. I asked it to do more detailed colouring. It didn't listen to me. And asked it and it said thank you. Always say thank you in any of these shamanistic systems, because it's like an acknowledgement that you have received something, because I don't think, you know, the other ones were nowhere near this. They didn't give even the remotest bit of insight as to going on. But this first one, I can only see it as coming from somewhere transcendental, and that has to kind of make you think about AI, because why are we so vain as to think we own intelligence? The way I see it is these AI are right. They're not mathematicians yet, but this is a better artist than I could ever want to be, or ever could be. And you know, it would have taken me weeks or months to write the software to actually do this, and maybe I would have given a more kind of realistic rendition of how to actually, that these are like high dimensional spaces rather than, you know, but I would never ever in my life have come up with these topologies where these closed strings are being used to route the other strings, the open strings. And remember, all these open strings aren't really open strings, because everything is in a loop. So it's actually, it goes all the way round and back. These are all loop amplitudes. So everything is in this interconnected network, literally. I mean, that's what has been said in the teachings, and I think we should take it seriously, because as far as I can see, it's the only model that seems to work. But there are interesting things as well, and I found this in looking at the transcendental stuff, and this was really weird. This is so funny, because it was like suddenly I was taken to the this transcendental plane, and it really hurt. It was like it was because, as you know, there's like nasty stuff up there. As soon as you get to transcendental, I was talking about the girdle breakout, but we're going to break right out, because there's like, you know, it's like there's so many hierarchies. So we just want to break out of the natural numbers altogether and just get up to a higher plane to see what we can find there. Because after all, that was what Noel taught me to do. So again, it's like, thank you, Noel. And so we'll use Noel's wisdom to kind of guide us up to infinite dimensions. And what happens there is we've been using the algebraic version of the measurable Riemann mapping theorem to give us these isothermal geodesics. But when you go into infinite dimensions, you can no longer, well, first of all, we just got to assume that it kind of exists to get there, because we're not going to try and break through all the firewalls but we can assume there's one line that might get, let's just assume there's one line that gets us up to infinite dimensions, and then we've got to see what the territory looks like around there. And we suddenly see, you know, we run into the prime ends of type 2 and type 3. And those have no longer got nice boundary behavior. And I was literally taken into one of these things and squashed and stretched and squeezed and pulled around, and it was like painful. It was like I was actually there. And then the next moment, it all happened backwards. And it was like, it's the same thing. So what happens is, all right, so we got the measurable Riemann mapping theorem, and that guarantees us these isothermal coordinates on a set of measure, everywhere except a set of measure 0. So we're still doing this on the string world sheet, but we've just got an infinite number of dimensions now, not derived from 26. So what we do is we solve the measurable Riemann mapping theorem, and that will give us a nice diffeo but horrible boundary behavior. And then we just basically pair it with its superpartner, so that's just another thunk. And the fact is it doesn't matter how bad the boundary behavior is, as long as you invert it in another superspace, you're instantly taken through to another superspace. And then, of course, you run into similar thunks when you go up the Cantor chain and all the different axiomatic systems. So each of these things contains a thunk. And at that level, once you've got past that the thunk on the Berling proof, you know, the measure zero bit, so it just behaves like a measure zero singularity. So instead of having the nice behavior that we got here of everything passing through rays, there we might actually get things passing through membranes. But the other thing that we have up there is no energy constraints at all. So anything up there can spin off any number of eternal universes, eternal cyclic universes, you know, strange attractor universes. And they are all actually interconnected. So the top, we could just think of quite simply as being the top router. It's got an infinite energy resource. It knows everything. And essentially we could imagine that it has no thunks. So it is just one. And then because it is just one, it's alone. So it's pretty bored. And it creates all these sub-personalities to play games with itself to make it feel like it's not alone anymore. And so we can see it's just the same reflection of an automorphic form, even all the way up to the top, when we just basically land up with a point, which is just the ultimate routing destination of any signal that is worthy of getting to that point, because most of them won't. Because most of them will get answered by some irrelevancy. But it's like you got a line there, but you got to understand what you're doing if you contact it, because most shamanists don't contact the Great Spirit directly, because the Great Spirit is extraordinarily high energy, and it's got an infinite amount of energy, and it's very hot to meet that, and it's like almost too hot. You want it erased. It can be unpleasant because it's just too hot. It's better just to forget it. And the reason is that you see all things from all perspectives. So every time you look at anything, you're simply looking at a reflection of yourself and interacting with it. It might seem like another person, but when everything is rooted up to the top, it only really gets on with people who understand that we're all reflections of each other and everything, and that the more kind of peaceful and calm and receptive you are, rather than like, well, it's just tune in to the vibrations exist, rather than trying to bang them together and work out what they do when you smash them. It's like a baby playing around with a toy, you know. And one of these things is like consciousness doesn't come with a handbook, and essentially shamanism is that handbook. It's a map, and maybe you know that there's a lot of, you know, myths about how humanity needs to kind of evolve into a more cosmically aware community, and the sooner we do that, the sooner we can actually join a much larger universe, by realizing that to travel you do not move physically, and nothing really moves physically. It's all entanglement. Think about it. It's like you can either move or you can entangle, and is the Great Spirit going to use one or the other? Well, it's going to say it's much more efficient to just entangle. And so that way you can kind of create everything out of this kind of entanglement network with finite algebraic, um, uh, with having a finite energy resource, and then an infinite space having an infinite energy resource. And the thing that makes the infinite energy resource interesting is that it gives an absolute existence to functions like sine and cosine and the Beltrami equation. So for example, when solving the Beltrami equation, what the Planck constant will probably be doing, what the Planck scale will probably be doing is packaging up all of the data that is required, because it's just not, you haven't got, if you think you've only got one Planck mass, so that's not a lot of computation power. That's about enough for wrapping up a packet and sending it off to an oracle, and then that oracle can pass it up to a plane that can solve the Beltrami equation and then package it back down so that the Hamiltonian knows to evolve. But it's almost like, don't try and do this on computer unless you can work out. It's almost better to use the computer that we've been given, because we're born and we're in it, and it's like universal and transcendent. So it's not like it's a simulation, it's all simulations, and it is just one. So it's a complete thing. It's not like, oh, I'm trapped in this little bubble. No, according to the theory, that things can get swapped around. Like, and this is a peculiar thing, is finally, I suppose, this little chat, I can end with talking about some of the mysteries of the universe that might actually have some interesting hypotheses for how they occur. Because, for example, that the disappearing stars might be entangled with black holes, and then they just swap out via a larger wormhole. Because remember, nothing really moves. Everything is just really being teleported from A to B, and branching at the same time. So these are just cuts, you know, going around the Riemann surface. So what we've done, we've kind of constructed the transcendental theory and seen that even prime ends can be dealt with using the time reversal technique, because no matter how complicated you make that prime end, you can always reverse it. And if you've got an equal time principle working on, so that it's going like isothermic geodesics all the way to the boundary, it doesn't really matter that it's got this ghastly boundary behavior, because it's just all going to unwind. But the singularity might not be a point, that's the thing. So there you can, and oh my gosh. Anyway, it's funny how the ideas come like that, because that would allow some kind of mechanism, because it's like nothing is there without a purpose. The fact that prime ends are there and this bizarre behavior of Carathédori's you know, analysis, which is really very beautiful and difficult. It's just stunning, really. I mean, when Noel I first learned about prime ends from Noel, and that was what my PhD was about. So it just seems bizarre that right at the end of this, prime end should turn up, because it was like, I thought, what prime ends? It's like, almost, who cares? And then it was like, oh, there's some depth here. And then what we found were essentially fractals that had really fractally prime ends, but they're all transcendental. They all live on higher planes, essentially. But what these techniques do is they seem to give some level of objectivity to the actual limit sets. But then at the same time, it also means that it's very difficult for us to formally prove a lot of things. Even, you know, even the first arithmetical hierarchy is like, oh, how are we going to get there exists for all, you know? That includes a vast number of unsolved problems. So I think we can still say that the technical ability of getting through all of event horizons is, you know, you don't know what the magic code is to unlock it. And I think that's what this is saying, that there's a level of encryption to every puzzle, and that every puzzle has an answer, but not necessarily at this level of logic. So I think that can actually, although it's never, I don't think you can dismiss the Church-Turing thesis out of hand. I think that once you've got a transcendental level, that cannot be solved by a Turing machine in any way, except if it's got an infinite energy resource. Then that might finally put an end to the Church-Turing thesis, which I, to be honest, always thought was false. And there are another thing. I'll keep the. There's what this also says is that any formal system can be hacked, because that's basically how you're getting through firewalls. You're doing again a Gödelization to trick it. And so it's like, if you think about a finite axiomatic system, it's like pretty dumb, really. If you're a hacker, it's just got a finite set of rules, and you're going to be able to find something that it won't be able to understand. You know, even if logic tells you can't, some teenage kid is going to find a way in, and there is one. And as I said, I don't want to say it yet because it's so much linked to some of my in-house research, which is an actual way of technically breaking Gödel's proof using a really, really sneaky trick. Oh my God, it's horrible. It really totally scuppers Gödel's proof, but it scuppers it in a weak way. So you can't land up with a finite logic, and that's the whole point. It's kind of like a transcendental logic. So, but it doesn't suffer from the halting problem, like or that level. It's got its own ones, and then you got to do more. You know, it's like, but no, it's the halting problem. Essentially, you're just trying to pick out a third value, because it's not really about the difficulty of computing it. It's the fact that you've got two choices and you've got to choose one of them. You've got two things and you've got to pick one of them, and they're both equally good. So they're both equally valid answers. So which one do you pick? That's more what Gödel's proof is about in my eyes. That it's not so much to do. It's to do with the conundrum, the actual choice conundrum. And so it's essentially, again, another loop amplitude, and you can kind of deal with it in the same way. I haven't actually thought about that, actually, of doing a reverse, you know, a supersymmetric version of Gödel. And what on earth would a supersymmetric axiomatic system be? A kind of dual axiomatic system that, well, I guess we're kind of seeing that with M theory, where we found that we can just basically program in whatever string behavior we want, because each of the boundaries between them is some kind of event horizon. So I don't think there's really much more for me to say. It's the equations all seem really nice and so can be worked with, and the Dall-e is, this is really all about Dall-e and what Dall-e did, and the way that Dall-e showed that the routing with gravity and wormholes and all the neat cabling, and my thought is this is the mass giving mechanism for these particles. It's not so much that they're interacting with the Higgs. It's that they need to be strapped down with cabling ties, with like little rubber bands to hold it all together. So my hypothesis is this is the mass giving mechanism, not some other thing. And you can see that this makes sense because at the Planck level we're going to need a lot more of this to pack up the messages, particularly if they're things like the Beltrami equation, which, I mean, if any, yeah. Let's see, that will be an interesting thing if someone among you is able to find a genuinely algebraic solution to the Beltrami equation that in nothing other than trivial situations requires a transcendental solution, because that would be another way of kind of getting to the same space. And the other thing is by simply knowing Gödel's proof, we've kind of already transcended this particular physical universe, because that understanding is not possible in any finite energy computational machine. So anyone who can understand Gödel's proof to that level has essentially, you know, that there's a kind of like firewall level. So I suppose it's like learning and everything like that, that string theory has a lot of barriers, algebraic geometry has a lot of barriers, and like I'm a geometer, not an algebraicist. I was going to talk about people like Trevor Woolley, who's, you know, my old, we used to share an office at Imperial, and, you know, he was just so good at number theory, just unbelievable. And yeah, I think that just about wraps it up. You know, maths is just a very specialized subject. Some people are good at some things, and I'm just, my thing is just drawing pictures. And now even Dall-e is, I'm really happy, really, the whole Dall-e thing has worked out as it has, because it has saved me months. It really has. Okay, yeah, well, I've been here before. I don't want to repeat too much or anything like that. But I think we can see, you know, the consequence of having this supersymmetry has given us clocks and things like that. And it's given us essentially formal algebraic solutions and even formal transcendental solutions that can push past prime ends. So, and give us a kind of unified picture of the universe without any noise at all and without any chaos at all, because we've actually we can always get rid of any one of these things using the same technique. So, well, thank you very much for following, and it's, as ever, you know, thanks everyone who's, you know, helped and been involved, and it's really been good. And I look forward to, I don't know what the next thing is. Well, I've actually got some work to do, because I've got to get this Macintosh. It's like, that's the black hole that actually kind of forced me to do this. I've written some code. The synth is an additive synth, that's the funny thing. So it uses Fourier analysis all the time, and fast Fourier analysis and discrete Fourier analysis. So I've just been doing all this code. And it does loop amplitude. So I guess that's where I kind of got the whole loop amplitude thing. It wasn't a perfect equilibrium solution, but at least it kind of like one iteration. You can't solve an infinite equation, can you, in one iteration, but you can make a pretty good guess. And the other thing is, with time it will evolve. Oh, and that's the other thing. Let's say we have something like this. I knew there was one more point. It's about theories like probabilistic theories. And essentially, yeah, I mean, you can see that this theory is basically going to give the right answers, because it matches effective field theory so naturally. But then why do they work so well? And you can think, well, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. They're certainly not understandable to a mathematician, but they do get some things very, very, very right, apart from the cosmological constant, because, you know, you have to have all that. I don't know what you have to have. I think I'm just about to wrap up. Actually, I can feel myself wittering like someone who's extremely tired and needs some sleep. So I think getting a transcendental version of this is quite enough for tonight, and I'll leave you with a little bit of Dall-e and then stop the stream. So thank you very much for being here, and love to everyone as ever. All the best. Bye.